We're here today to talk a little bit about 2024 stats. I know throughout the year, there's been, certainly some smaller stories written about this, but considering the significant, kind of historic run that we've had, we thought it was important to really give an outlay of, what we planned on doing and what we hopefully plan on doing in the future regarding, crime and public safety in the city, throughout the city, particularly on the Mayor Wu's watch here. So I'm going to start off with something pretty simple and talk about the Boston Police Department's mission. Our mission is to partner with the community to fight crime, reduce fear, and improve the quality of life in our neighborhoods. Quite frankly, our mission is community policing, and it actually goes through everything that we try to do here. Some of the goals that we had going through the year was to reduce and prevent crime victimization, reduce fear of crime, hold offenders accountable for their actions, effectively manage critical events and incidents, and improve employee wellness internally, as well as internal and external communications in general. The goal, at least in the police department, we were trying to do this through building trust, through community partnerships and participating in public safety, making them a partner in all that we're doing here regarding public safety. And we also were doing this through partnerships in general, particularly our partnerships around violence prevention partnerships, which Dr. Yablo will talk about in a minute as far as the city's input into this. And then obviously gun reduction and then professionalism, our police department in general, as well as every officer trying to authentically engage the community where they are to find out the best way to use our resources in general to provide public safety across the board. So now I'll talk a little bit about the statistics. Overall incidents of gunfire in the city have declined 14% this year and are down 37% when compared to a 5-year average. This was the lowest year of incidents of gunfire in the city since 2011, when we began reliably tracking the statistics. Shooting victims have declined 70% compared to last year and 18% compared to a 5-year average, nearly 40% compared to the 10-year average. Over the previous 2 decades, the city has averaged more than 260 victims shot per year. Over the past 3 years, this has declined by more than 100 victims average per year. This is the 3rd consecutive year of declines in shooting victims and shooting incidents. This is the 3rd year in a row with less than 200 victims shot in the city. Prior to 2021, only 1 year, 2019, had recorded less than 200 shooting victims since at least 2005, when we started to track that data. Overall, Part 1 crime is up 1%, driven by increases in aggravated assaults, commercial burglaries, and larcenies. Overall violent crime is down 2%, despite the 3% increase in aggravated assaults, made up mostly of domestic aggravated assaults. Our homicide rate is at 24 this year currently, and appears to be the lowest since 1957, and remains by far the lowest total since the data began tracking reliability in 2007. This is a decrease of 33% compared to last year and 37% compared to a 5-year average. Property crime has decreased 2%, has increased 2%, driven mainly by the 30% increase in shoplifting incidents. Commercial burglaries are up 6%. However, an analyst shows that this is entirely related to shoplifting incidents being recoded as commercial burglaries due to a quirk in NYBER's methodology. When the suspect has been previously trespassed from a business and then they're arrested for shoplifting again, it's upgraded to a commercial robbery. This impacts about 27% of all commercial breaks this year. Removing this statistic, we estimate, would actually have commercial burglaries decrease by 17% this year if that enigma was not in place. Firearm violence remains at historic low levels this year, and the incidents of gunfire in the city have declined 14% compared to last year, and down 37%, versus the 5-year average. Shooting victims declined 7%, making this the lowest year of shooting victims since 2005, again, when we started to keep track of that data. At the end of November, there were 564 crime guns recovered and 436 arrests made that year, which is comparable to what we've done before in the past. and our arrests this past year have gone up about 9%. So, again, we work in partnership with the city and in so many different ways, and all the partnerships we have, I think Isaac will actually, elaborate a lot more through that, but we went into the year with a strategy around crime reduction and violence, and in my short time as commissioner, I can even speculate a little further. In the entire time that I've been a police officer, going back since when I came on, the city has never been safer, period, when it comes to crime, particularly violent crime. And it could probably go back to before I was born in the city. So that being said, I'm a resident, longtime resident of the city, and I've never been more proud of both the city and the leadership of the city in relationship to crime and crime reduction. And so I'm going to conclude that for now and let the mayor speak, but we'll certainly answer some of your questions after this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Commissioner, for your incredible leadership and for all that you do every day. We are in good hands, and the numbers certainly show that. Thank you to Dr. Yablo for all of the 24 hours work that he's been coordinating, and I'm really grateful to be able to be here to brag a little bit about the incredible efforts that the teams across the city have been putting in, and also, most of all, to thank the public safety officials in Boston, our police officers, all of the leadership, Boston EMS, Boston Fire, and our first responders, all of our street outreach partners, folks at the Boston Public Health Commission, and the many, many partners that make this possible. I will start is there someone here for Spanish language? Okay, so I will primero en español, and then I'll go to some of the points that I wanted just to make, touching on both of these areas. Entonces, gracias. Todo lo que hacemos en la ciudad de Boston está basado en la seguridad y el bienestar de todas nuestras familias y nuestros residentes. Y sabemos que lo que estamos haciendo está funcionando. El 2024 marcó el año más bajo en incidentes con armas desde que comenzamos a recolectar esos datos hace más de una década. Por cuarto año consecutivo, hemos visto una disminución en los incidentes de violencia armada y en la cantidad de personas impactadas directamente por las armas. Y el año pasado tuvimos el número más bajo de víctimas de homicidio en más de 2 décadas. Todo ese progreso es gracias a nuestro enfoque interdepartamental, nuestra colaboración entre los departamentos de la ciudad y con los varios socios comunitarios y a todos nuestros vecindarios. Sabemos que el primer paso para ser un hogar para todos es ser la ciudad más segura en todo el país. También hay muchas actividades y coordinación entre todos los departamentos de la ciudad. Nosotros sabemos que el seguro público es más que simplemente responder a crímenes. Es de asegurarnos que desde el comienzo estamos haciendo todo lo posible para prevenir la violencia también. Por eso estamos invirtiendo en soportes integrales que todos nuestros residentes pueden utilizar para su beneficio. Este año, nosotros ofrecimos un trabajo pagado a cada estudiante de escuelas públicas de Boston que quiso, para un total de más de 10,000 jóvenes con trabajo este verano. Nosotros reabrimos 8 parques este año y 20 desde que asumimos la oficina en 2021. Y al mismo tiempo, nosotros lo convertimos en un modelo nacional para la educación infantil y pre-K en Boston, casi duplicando el número de pre-K Boston y puestos de guardería en sitios de comunidad para servir a más de 1,500 niños de 3 y 4 años, al mismo tiempo creando casi 400 trabajos para educadores infantiles. En las escuelas públicas de Boston hemos visto un aumento en inscripciones por primera vez en casi una década. Estamos soportando y creando miles de trabajos bien pagados para nuestros residentes que elevan a nuestros negocios pequeños y grandes. Lanzamos el primer programa de mercado protegido y ampliamos nuestra capacidad para brindar mayores oportunidades a mujeres, veteranos y personas de color para presentar ofertas en contratos de la ciudad. Y estamos asegurándonos de que nuestros empleadores entienden todo lo que nuestra ciudad tiene que ofrecer. Entonces, es una fuerza total. Okay, so I just wanted to summarize some of the statistics and some of the coordination that was at scale. I, again, want to begin in gratitude and just note that Boston is well known as a national leader in community safety. This year, just even a couple months ago, the commissioner of the department hosted the largest international and national conferences for law enforcement officials, the IACP conference and the Major Chiefs Association, where Boston was highlighted as the example of what community policing looks like with many of the innovations and the actions that were taken. Dr. Yablo hosted the National League of Cities convening where, how many cities was it? Nearly 50 years. Almost 50 cities came to learn specifically about public safety and community safety from Boston and took back those findings. So I'm proud and grateful for all the work that has gone into making us the national leader with numbers that are really lower, comparable to no other major city in this moment around the homicide rate and other factors, but also, as you heard from the commissioner, at a historic low in terms of Boston's own continued efforts around keeping the city safe. So why do we do this? Why does it matter? It's not about numbers. It is that safety is the foundation for everything that we do in making Boston a home for everyone. And that we see this safety isn't just the absence of harm or fear or violence. It is the positive affirmation of belonging, of people feeling excited to be part of a community, that they are welcome and able to use every opportunity in every part of every neighborhood. And so there are two pieces, I think, two themes to the work that has happened. The first is constantly innovating to meet community needs, continuing to push ourselves to raise that bar and to do whatever it takes to be the leading example. And the second is focused coordination of all resources in City Hall and with our partners at all levels, especially on the ground in the community. Now, almost 3 years ago, in April 2022, Boston launched a dedicated focus to bring everyone in the violence prevention space together and conducted a national expert-led violence reduction workshop. We've always been the national model, but it was important for us to really dig down deep into the data, get everyone together, and say, what is our strategy that we are all going to hold each other accountable to? At the conclusion of that multi-day workshop, which included, of course, all of our city departments and officials who were involved, it included the district attorney's office and all other levels, as well as the many, many community providers who have been deep in this work for a long time. There was a collective goal set to drive down homicides by 20% over the next 3 years. We, of course, met that goal within the next year and have surpassed it again year after year. Some of what came out of that workshop was really ensuring that we would stay at that same table together and to stay focused on the strategy, the data, and really understanding from the ground up what we needed to do every single day of the year, not just immediately after a tragic incident might take place. And so some of the innovations that I want to brag about a little bit, and I know the Commissioner and Isaac could answer in much more detail, but things that I have observed that I think have really been examples of how we push ourselves to keep innovating and also keep everyone at the table. Boston Police, for example, launched basically as soon as the Commissioner arrived, Community CompStat, which was the first time that the internal data that Boston Police reviews on a regular basis was able to be shared publicly, anonymized and protecting everyone's privacy. But now in each part of the city, at each of the police precincts, community members come together on a regular basis to hear the same data that officers and leadership at the highest levels know. This has resulted in not only shared understanding of what's happening and the trends in each part of our city, but also strategies that community members have then shared and information that they have conveyed that have actually helped shape how we respond. The commissioner has also really innovated in making sure that staffing is effective and again, to meet community needs. We've had the largest academy classes that Boston has seen over the last several years in a row, to the point where when we go and visit the academy, they're not learning in the classroom anymore because there's not enough seats in that classroom as built. There are desks in the gym area because we have been seeing that level of interest and recruitment and dedication to the department and what Boston Police stands for. The last classes that have been the largest have also been the most diverse in the city's history in terms of language background, in terms of cultural and ethnic background, and as well as connection to the city of Boston. There have been innovations that many of the teams have put together to make sure that everyone from all walks of life can become an officer too. Recruitment has taken place out in our neighborhoods, not just through the standard ads, but at the Mattapan Library and at different community centers and locations directly in our neighborhoods. And childcare has been offered for officers who are working parents going through the academy for the very first time as well. I'm very grateful that we have a police contract in place that we negotiated across the table, and that officers overwhelmingly ratified to hold themselves to the highest national standards of accountability, taking actions that no other department has taken in ensuring that discipline holds, and that officers who have been found to have taken part in the most serious offenses will not be on the force, and that those loopholes are closed. It also invests historically in officer wellness and education, retention incentives, so that this can be a lifestyle that is sustainable for those who are saving so many lives in our city. The most recent that's gotten a lot of great feedback from community is the deployment of community intervention teams, which I hope he'll brag about a little bit more, but a new and very important innovation in how our incoming officers are staffed, broken into two groups, and part traditional training and deployment in the neighborhoods, and part walking the beat and being out in community where their visibility and presence has been most requested and most connects with what we're seeing in the neighborhoods. On the community safety side, for the first time in a very long time, there's been a regular focus to bring back the weekly youth safety meetings. That way, every single week, no matter what is happening, there's a way for all involved to understand what resources are needed and what supports can be deployed to help young people in our schools who are coming into contact at train stations and T stations or at community centers and other locations. There has been not only a coordination of post-incident review meetings, but also a dedicated monthly strategy meeting that Dr. Yablo has been leading to ensure that, again, every month of the year, not just in the summer, and every single week, there's a dedicated focus on preventing violence and driving these numbers down. And there's also been a specific place-based strategy to invest in the areas of the city where we believe the opportunity zones of the city are, and activating through community block party grants and other connections and partnerships so that there is activity all year round. We've also seen other departments really lean in. Boston Center for Youth and Families picked up their programming, again, coordinated by Dr. Yablo and with our Chief of Human Services, Jose Masso, and Marta Rivera, who is the director of BCYF, to make sure that in the week after school ends and before summer jobs start, and then after summer jobs end and before school starts again, there's dedicated programming for young people throughout the city, that there's weekends and late night opportunities for safe gatherings, and through our BCYF Center and other programmings, we've upped the level of paid youth summer jobs to historic levels, more than 10,000 young people having a paid summer job over the summer, when we guaranteed that any Boston Public School student who wanted one would be able to get one. This last summer, we had more programming in our parks than ever before. We have nearly doubled the size of universal pre-K and also expanded early college through our school system, invested in small businesses, and seen enrollment in Boston Public Schools go up for the first time in over a decade, and chronic absenteeism go down. So it really has been an all-hands-on-deck effort. Again, that this is about saving lives, and that is maybe the most important investment at all, to stop cycles of trauma and violence. And we also see that a focus on delivering results especially in the areas of violent crime, leads to resources that can then be deployed to address quality of life issues and those safety issues that residents might feel most of all, and can help shape the strategy of whether it's shoplifting, package thefts, issues in our neighborhoods, or addressing the opiate crisis. When we do well at keeping violent crime down, we do well at doing everything else as in addition. Most of all, we know that there's more work to do. So today is not a victory lap, but a report out and a reflection that of the type of results we see when we all understand community safety to be a collective responsibility that we share and that everyone has a part in. So, we look forward to much more work ahead and continuing to drive down every category of crime. But I want to thank all those who have worked so hard over this last year and over the last 3 years to ensure that Boston continues to make progress and reshape what is possible in our neighborhoods. And I'll pass it to Dr. Yablo.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Commissioner Cox. Isaac Yablo, Senior Advisor for Community Safety in the Mayor's Office. And I would like to echo what my colleagues have said. It's been a tremendous year of success here in the city of Boston, specifically looking at firearm violence and our reductions. As the Mayor mentioned, we came together around 2 years ago and agreed on 3 core strategies that we will continue to craft and make better, focusing on individuals that are most likely to engage in firearm-related crime, looking at how our environment and the built environment contributes to crime, so making sure that we have built environment interventions, as well as positive policing through CIT and other initiatives under the police department. As the Mayor mentioned, a weekly incident review where we all come together and talk about what happened, how we can do better, and how our intervention strategy should be shaped and crafted based on what happened. And perhaps, in my opinion, I think this is where we have done so well as a city, is a constant monitoring of what the problem is. So we don't go into any solution-based conversation without a constant and most up-to-date understanding of what the problems are, where they lie, who is most likely to be impacted, and that has really shaped the work. And to be honest, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank a number of people. So obviously the community safety team, myself, Dan Hudson, Elaine Davis, Matt Parker, and others. But there's so many other people across the city. Everyone in this city understands that they have a role to play within our violence prevention ecosystem. So specifically, I'd like to thank the Boston Public Health Commission, so our Life Course unit, which is solely focused on reducing firearm violence, and they have been extremely successful. Our Community Healing and Response Network, formerly known as Neighborhood Trauma Teams, that are there 24/7 to respond to incidents of community violence and homicide. The VIP, Village in Progress Violence Intervention Program under the Health Commission as well, that is really doing an amazing job of doing some deep prevention work within communities that are most impacted. And then a host of other people, Youth Options Unlimited, which is under our Office of Workers Empowerment, Workers Empowerment Cabinet rather, Youth Options, Youth Connect, which is I don't know, Commissioner, I don't know how you describe them, but I look at them as one of our most important collaborators across the city. And then, of course, the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, We Are Better Together, the Warren Daniel Hairston Project, Mothers for Justice and Equality, all of our hospital violence intervention partners that do amazing work. So many people, and I can't name everyone because it's truly so many people, departments, offices, cabinets, et cetera, that are involved. And as the Mayor mentioned, we have been able to brag about our successes, both locally and on a national scale. So we actually, 2 weeks ago, we just wrapped our first ever regional convening, which is focused on a regional look of the gun violence problem across eastern Massachusetts. So I'd like to say everywhere from New Bedford and Fall River up to Lynn, and bringing everyone together looking at that. As the Mayor mentioned, the National League of Cities, we brought them here, around 45 to 50 cities, to learn about what we're doing in Boston, as well as the Institute for Intergovernmental Research. That was around 30 cities. I've been able to travel, and members of the community safety team have been able to travel to speak about what we've done. So we've presented at the National League of Cities City Summit in Tampa. I recently spoke at the National Public Safety Partnership 10th anniversary in Minneapolis. And then we're also supporting other cities in towns from across the country. We've worked with Birmingham, Alabama. We're currently in conversations with Burlington, Vermont. We've had conversations with Seattle, Washington, and so that'll just continue. With all that being said, the main thing here is that we are not done. We will continue to get better. I'm in the community every single day, and I deal with residents that have been impacted by violence and community violence and trauma, and we cannot rest well until we are at zero. That is our goal, and we believe that through strategic investments, through things like our plan to end violence, we actually can get to zero, and we won't stop until we get to zero. Thank you.
Mayor, I heard a lot of different reasons, but if there were one that you think has made the biggest difference, what would that be in terms of cutting on suffering?
Strong coordinated leadership. It's the dedication of everyone moving in the same direction on the city side and in community, and having that commitment every day of the year, every week of the year, to make this the focus.
And so, what are your plans? Because we always see a spike in violence around the summertime. What's the plan to address that? It seems to be a trend every year.
Yeah, so when you say, summertime presents more challenges, only because there's more people out in summer. The schools aren't in session during the summer. There's more idle time. The daylight hours are a lot longer. People are just around each other a lot more in the summertime. So that just presents opportunities for, issues and things of that nature. But the reality is even the summer months, in comparison to what we were before in the past, are being reduced each summer as well. And so, we would love to be able to reduce all crime, but the fact is we probably won't. That'll be a challenge for us. There's no doubt about that. But the fact is that we're getting better at it. And, the mayor made reference to, I think, a really good example is that 2 years ago, South Bay Mall, we had issues with a large number of youth that were going through there and, wreaking havoc in some of the stores and things of that nature. The city makes sure that every, high school student who wants a job gets a job. And the very next summer, we have nowhere near the number of incidents that occur in general. That, along with us being able to be a little bit more agile and making sure that we're working with people in the business community and all the residents around it to make sure that we're doing all we can to meet the challenge. But the fact is that we work so well together right now with all the partnerships. I mean, the police, we're pretty good at what we do in general. But the fact is, when you add in public partnerships, city partnerships, private partnerships, and all our other federal partners involved, I think it makes us way more effective in what we do.
Earlier this
Can we add a little bit just on that point?
And I would just say summer safety planning, legit starts now. So we start around 6 months prior to the summer, and we have public meetings where we actually engage residents and talk to residents about what they'd like to see. And I think the mayor and commissioner made excellent points. South Bay was used. Our Office of Youth Engagement and Advancement is very, very focused on the summer months, specifically 6 to 9 p.m. So we had initiatives last year. And then within the communities that have experienced violence during the summer, they're always a priority for summer grant funding opportunities and availability. So we really focus on the places, year-round, obviously, but during the summer months, there's even more of a focus.
Earlier this month, there was a hearing at City Council level, called a hearing on public safety after some concerns about some violence on the common. There was a stabbing and some drug use that residents were concerned about there. What's being done to address some of that and some of the crime that perhaps maybe previously had been at Mass and Cass but is making its way into some neighborhoods?
Yeah, so I will say that the mayor again made reference to our CIT teams, our community interaction units. And so the point is that they are working in the commons and other places where we get public, feedback saying that, they're worried about whether it's crime or fear of crime, because a lot of the times it's more fear of crime than actual crime itself. And so we're highly visible in some of those spaces to make sure that people feel safe, and also addressing the issues that we see while we're out there around that. You just cited numbers that are pretty historic. Didn't say we can eliminate all crime, but we're doing all we can to do that. But the fact is, given the historic numbers that we had, things do happen sometimes, and I think it's really important to let people know that we also hold people accountable when they do happen. We've had some pretty major, drug investigations, whether it stemmed from Mass and Cass area or some of the other, gang-related housing areas, incidents that we've had in the past. Let's see here. B2 initiated a drug investigation in Mass and Cass that led to a multi-jurisdictional probe. And a drug trafficking organization was dismantled. 19 individuals were arrested, and the top 2 leaders of that organization were held accountable. Over 20 kilos were recovered, $450,000 U.S. currency, and 6 firearms as a result of an investigation we did at Mass and Cass. And we've done several other things in the background. We are doing all we can, like the men and women that work here, take their job very seriously when it comes to investigations and partnering and holding people accountable that are doing things. And we've been doing some long-term investigations as well as short-term ones to hold folks accountable in our city. So the combination of all of the different partnerships that we have to reduce violence, as well as also, addressing some of the underlying causes of it in the first place that the city has been working with so well with, and holding people flat out accountable for their actions, make us a much safer city.
And can I note on just to add a little bit more on Sharman's second question? BPD does an amazing job with all the different asks that are put on them. There's, as you heard, response when an incident happens, and then all of the push for investigations and accountability and justice afterwards. There's prevention that dovetails with the work that Dr. Yablo and community members are doing. And having visibility and having presence can be an important part of that, especially in certain locations and in response to community feedback. And so what we have heard from community is that the issues at the Common have gotten significantly better because there's been more capacity for EPD to respond directly and to be more visible and to be more present in the right places, in the right locations and times. Having 123 new officers graduate fairly recently, I'm sure helped a little bit in that as well. And so we, through the pandemic and right afterwards, like departments across the country definitely saw staffing levels dip for a variety of reasons. And that was true across other departments as well, of public workers, public servants who gave it all in the pandemic, and in the case of our officers, kept working through those years without a settled contract, without cost of living increases. And so to be able to now have more protections for this to be a livable job, a sustainable job for the whole family, for officers, as well as then boosting the staffing levels, we hope that will make a difference, especially in how the commissioner has made sure that those officers are deployed. We want to keep that up, but we know over the summer they are asked to, in any given week, there's dozens of public events, from parades and festivals and gatherings that require officers to be there. And so you really feel during those months some of the strain that can happen. And so we want to be there to address that and make sure that we're at the right levels in addition to the right deployment.
What about the public gathering, though, the open air drug use that has spilled over into other neighborhoods? When the ordinance was put in place, there seemed to be like there was going to be a zero tolerance policy, but that still continues. So what's the strategy to prevent that from happening as something gets warmer?
So I have to ask you some data, and I just made reference to like a pretty significant, drug thing that we did at Mass and Cass, and and so we do drug investigations all the time, and we're still currently doing them. One of the things that we did around in our community ComStat is getting feedback from the public about what they expect and need for us in each community, because every community is a little different. And I think we've been, more importantly, highly responsive to the demands that they ask. So there's some aspects of this, like we've already kind of said before, that we're not going to, criminalize, people that have mental health issues or all the other things associated with some of those things. And so the fact is that, we are doing more working with the DA's office as far as, trying to get people that need help. If they don't want to do it voluntarily, get it help will help either through the courts or through some type of, services over sentencing. It is, we didn't invent the opioid crisis in general, and I don't necessarily know if we can arrest our way out of it, period. But the fact is, we do need to do more to make people feel safer in their communities, and we are trying to do that by being way more agile with these teams of officers going in places, making sure people know that we will hold them accountable, particularly if they're around residents. And that's, an ongoing thing that we're trying to do in general.
And I would just go to during the summer, when you rolled out the summer safety plan, it seemed, I think you mentioned it today as well, that it seems to be a lot of the gun violence is a concentrated group of people who are repeat offenders. Is there like a certain amount of time that they're in jail before they're allowed back out on the streets? Or can you just get into like what the crackdown is on that to make sure that they're not repeat offenders?
So I think what you're making reference to is certainly statistics to show, particularly around violent crime and actually some other forms of crime in general, that we see repeat offenders doing things over and over again, more so than a lot of people doing it, particularly around violent crime. And that's been, the case for many years, and it still is. And that's the reason why we are so data-driven and use intelligence to make sure that we focus for the right people to have an impact on the community. And when we do that, there is an impact on the community, and that's currently what you see with our crime trends getting lower and lower and lower. Because that's the goal. That's how you get to zero, is you get lower and lower and lower each year, and that's what we've been trying to do and focus on. In reference to, I'll just simply put it this way. We are trying to be as agile as we can in ways, particularly that the public really cares about dealing with issues that they see. As fast as we find out about it, we're trying to implement a plan and partner with people to address those issues. And we need partners because we're public safety. There's only so many things we can do, but the partners can do so many more other things that they do. And so I would say as a department, we are far more agile than we were maybe just a couple of years ago as far as addressing, issues that we get feedback from the public on.
And let's go to Dr. Yablo on this one, and then there was a question over here, and then we'll go to Nikki.
Yeah, and I would add, it really does help on the violence prevention intervention side to have a dedicated unit that is the life course unit within the Health Commission that is solely focused on gun violence reduction and prioritizing those individuals that are chronically and consistently involved with firearms, offering them intensive case management services, et cetera, et cetera. That has been an excellent addition, in addition to all the work that the Boston Police Department does, having a dedicated team. They're not the stop shoplifting team, they are the stop shooting team. And they do a very, very good job. So it's actually 3 separate programs. So you have SSYI, Safe and Successful Youth Initiative, Promoting Potential. So Promoting Potential is under 17, SSYI 18 to 24, and then the Men's Health Initiative 25 and up. So they view and look at chronic involvement of firearms across the life course. And that's why we have 3 separate programs. So if an individual comes to us under the age of 18, we still have the ability to work with them. Because as we've seen, the gun violence problem in Boston is not necessarily a juvenile problem. It's actually a grown adult problem. The average age has fluctuated between 27 and 30 years old as average age of shooter and person that has been shot. So that's why it's important if we do the intervention when they're very young, we have the ability to work with them consistently throughout their life course.
And we've been continuing to invest in and strengthen partnerships with our Office of Reentry, Office of Returning Citizens in terms of community members who are coming back to community from behind the walls.
Yeah, I mean, just maybe you could just expand that by maybe take an example, like how do you use the data to identify, is there like a list of these, like maybe just walk through an example, or like how does it work to use the data to kind of, and then how to get resolved?
Sure, so I can kind of give you 2 examples. So I can give you one that helped us figure out the areas, opportunity zones, empowerment, resiliency areas that we need to be focusing on. So one of the first things I did when I stepped into this role, I can't believe it's almost been 2 years, but stepped into this role is I got with the Boston Police Department, specifically our Boston Regional Intelligence Center, the BRIC, and I asked them for compiled data on the areas that have disproportionately seen the most amount of firearm violence going back 5 years at that time. So it's 2018 at that time. And from that analysis that at the time Dave Carabin and now Ryan Walsh oversees, we came up with between 17 to 20 of these micro locations that might be representative of housing development, park, street intersection, right? So I say that to say the Boston Police Department has been an excellent collaborator. And then in terms of the specific individuals, once again, the Boston Police Department. So they give us, and they tell us who we should be prioritizing, right? So it's not like I am labeling anyone. I'm not saying that anyone is, I'm relying on consistent police data because that is the best data that we have access to right now. So it may be, again, we have our weekly gun violence reduction management team meeting. Folks from the PD might say to me, Isaac, we have this person, X, Y, and Z, it would be great to get some outreach. Or it could come via email, or it could come via phone call. So it's really synthesizing police data and then making use of it.
So when you've got the micro location, you get individuals, and so how do you kind of interact with those individuals and kind of prevent the violence?
Yeah, so again, one of our main strategies to reduce firearm violence has been that environmental focus. So like looking at within these micro locations, is lighting good? What are the traffic patterns? Is there open congregation of folk that could lead to incidents of violence? So there's that, but then it's also just the citywide approach. Looking at the individual people, I like to say it's like Little Caesars, hot and ready. You have to have something hot and ready for them, right? You have to be able to offer them something tangible, which is why, for example, this year we did the first ever grassroots program, which is a program that takes 18 to 24-year-olds, puts them through intensive, you could say, career readiness training. We graduated 2 people in our last cycle, and one of the 2 is actually working for the city full time. And that all started by, once again, the police identifying someone for me that I should be prioritizing, outreaching, and again, I'm in the community on foot every day. So beating feet and going to meet these people, meeting them where they're at literally, and then having something tangible to offer them. So that's typically how it goes.
Thank you.
Mayor, Commissioner, these are, you mentioned historically low numbers. If I remember correctly, in July, the city's homicide count was at 6, and that is obviously quadrupled coming to the end of the year. What do you attribute that spike to?
So I wouldn't call it a spike, it was more normal for the summer. It's the fact is that we're doing so well up to that point that we were almost at 0. And so the summer played out like a traditional summer did. And it seemed like a spike, but it wasn't. It was more of a traditional summer than what we were experiencing prior to that. And so again, you know, I wouldn't call it a spike at all, but the fact is that any loss of life is too many. You know, but we're doing all we can to make sure that those numbers are always going down as much as we can.
Yeah, and looking at the individual police districts, it looks like every single one had a drop in homicides except for Dorchester and South Boston. Is there any targeted approach that you'll be taking in those areas specifically moving forward, or something you attribute those anomalies to?
Yeah, so without, you know, can't tell you right now, but the fact is each homicide has to be looked at on its own, you know, the reasons for it or that would lead up to it. And Dorchester has traditionally, you know, struggled around that area. But I do want to emphasize is if you look at some of those boards, and I don't know if we have them up there, over the history, those numbers are going down, and it's going down in all the areas for the most part. And unfortunately, you know, bad things can happen in any neighborhood, you know, given the right circumstances. But they're one-off versus a routine around some of this stuff. And so the fact is, when we see a spike in any kind of crime, we want to, as agilely as possible, address it, put people there to make sure it doesn't happen in the first place. Our first responsibility is to prevent it. Then our second responsibility is to hold people accountable that actually, you know, perpetrate these things. And I think we're doing a pretty good job on both.
Commissioner, oh, sorry. Here and then we'll come back.
I was just it was similar to that, just while the city is overall considered very safe, most of the murders occur in the so-called murder triangle, which is Dorchester, Roxbury, Manhattan, and Park. And I was just going to ask if there was a specific strategy with that, fitting in that area.
Yeah. So I've lived in 2 of those 3 areas, and I've never called it that. That being said, that traditionally, you know, if you go back to Boston's history throughout, for the most part, And it actually is not in our city, it's probably every city in America for the most part, areas where, you know, there's probably the most poverty or underlying issues, you probably have, you know, some correlation to some of the violence. But that being said, I think it's pretty remarkable, the number that, when we're talking history, right? The number of homicides we've had in the city up to this point are so tremendously lower than any other time. And I think it's amazing. So we talked about the Boston Miracle, I don't know how many years ago that was. And this number is far better than that. And even today, we're still being asked about, but something happened, right? I don't think people even understand the significance of the crime reduction that we actually are experiencing. You know, I'm pretty proud of the men and women that work in this job, that the hard work that they do of identifying the people that are driving the violence, holding them accountable, and then more importantly, working and partnering with all the people in the city to make sure that we address all those underlying issues that cause it. And I think this is the result of what you see. It's out there. But, you know, one murder is too many. Any crime is too much. But the fact is we are getting tremendously good at addressing these things year after year. But somehow it gets missed.
I would also add, again, spending time in community, residents don't refer to it as the murder triangle, nor should they. It's easy to frame things from a deficit mindset, but Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan produce much more positive than they do negative. My colleague that heads the police department is from one of those communities, was born and raised there, right? And so the contribution of residents of Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan in their impact on the city positively much outweighs so much more of the negative that could come from that framing.
And I would just push back also and ask the media as well to just to recognize the incredible scale of opportunity and progress and people taking care of each other that's happening in our neighborhoods, to push back against stereotypes that diminish the scale and effort of residents chipping in every single day to making their neighborhoods livable and beautiful and safe and welcoming. You know, we are far more frequently in these neighborhoods celebrating a ribbon cutting for a small business or the achievement of students at one of the schools. And we also need to be there when there are incidents that take place that we're looking to prevent and address. Every single incident of violence affects not just the direct individuals who have committed that violence and have been victimized by it, but the entire family constellation, the entire community constellation. And so we know that breaking these cycles of violence and trauma and poverty is really important. And that, again, takes all of us, but it also takes all of us recognizing the full scale of good that is happening in each one of our neighborhoods.
One more
Yes.
question. I think we touched on one.
There's a question here, and then anyone, if it's okay for anyone else who did it.
Someone who hasn't asked.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Commissioner, or any of you, really, 33% decline is a really staggering number. Is that sustainable, do you think?
You know, so starting January, we start all over again, trying to get to zero. And so the law of diminishing returns kind of says that the closer you get to zero, the harder it is the harder you have to work to reduce the number. But we're going to work as hard as we can. And we're also doing it at a time when we are still, you know, probably, you know, 200 officers down. You know, not only are we working hard, we're being as efficient as possible. And then we handle major events pretty successfully, from Celtic celebrations to more recently the Caribbean Festival, you know, this past year. We have a lot of major events going on. I think we do a lot of things really well here in the city, you know, and you know, you know, we're at the end of the year here, so I'm far more willing to talk about it now, but the fact is that in partnership with so many, we asked the public to participate in dealing with public safety, and they've stepped up and done that. The city is a tremendous partner in making sure that the needs of you know, vulnerable in the community are met. We asked our federal partners and other local law enforcement partners to work with us to do investigations to make sure we hold the people that are, victimizing so many people are taken off the streets. And they've worked with us to do that. We do really well in so many different categories. Don't really like to brag or talk about it much, but I am going to talk, for a second, that I'm deeply proud of the men and women that work here and the work that they do. And then city itself, in my lifetime here, these stats have not been presented by any mayor or any commissioner prior to us getting here. And I've never heard anyone say that. The fact is, I'm proud of the people that work in our department. I'm proud of the people that work in the city. And I'm proud of our city for accomplishing something that we've just not been able to do before.
Can
Yes.
I add a little bit, sorry, and I want to make sure that anyone who hasn't asked a question, and maybe Gayla afterwards, we can
Okay.
keep going
Yeah.
with you. On this point too, how I've been thinking about it, and especially as we've been really trying to hone in on looking at very specific data wherever we can, it's also important not to treat any single category of statistic or crime as all the same as well, right? So historically, there have been fatal shootings that have been perpetrated related to gang activity or related to juveniles and young people or related to domestic violence or some other types of incidents. And I think as we've seen, some of, each requires a different type of strategy as well to address. You can't just have a blanket approach to everything. Certainly, access to guns is a key factor that we in Boston and cities around the country have been struggling with as they have become more accessible, more 3D printed and just available in general. So having the laws that we have in Massachusetts is really important, and they need to be further strengthened all around the country. But having specific strategies and knowing within that number what the kind of driving causes are, even in specific case-by-case situations, is really important to trying to continue driving it down further. Do you want to add anything on that? Okay. Anyone else who didn't ask a question? You good? Anything else? Did you want to ask anything?
Just regarding the commercial burglaries, I know you mentioned there's some repeated offenders that are in the data as well. Is there anything that's being done in terms of that as well?
Yeah, no.
To protect the businesses?
Well, actually, that's an excellent question. So this past year, we started in conjunction with the DA's office and certainly the business community, Chamber of Commerce, that we started working with a lot of the businesses and creating a safe shopping initiative. We're probably about 9 months into it now, but the fact is that some of the things that we made mention about the same individuals driving, crime, we've noticed that is occurring in small businesses as well. But the fact is that not just individuals, these actually organized, crime syndicates, in a sense, using people to shoplift in large quantities. So I think that in the future, we're probably going to have some decent success because now we partner with people that in different ways that we haven't done before in the past, going into the new year to address this. As violent crimes drops, it gives us the opportunity to now address what some would consider lesser crime issues to make sure that we're focused on the right people are there too. And so that's something we started this year and we're working for going into the new year.
Can you say how you're partnering with them at all?
Sure. So partnering with them is information. When you talk to people, you get information, what they see, what access they have, access around cameras, rules of engagement. Like, a lot of the time, sometimes people just don't call the police, right? So now we're trying to make it easier so you can. The fact is that some of our private partners have far more technology than we do. Being able to have access to that is pretty important. And then with the DA's office, them being able to highlight these cases so when they go to court, the cases don't get thrown out immediately because the fact is that, there's a DA or somebody involved who specifically understands the significance of these kind of cases because we are now partnering with them to identify these people who are doing these things. And so this is something we were going to talk about a little bit, and I feel bad because the DA is not here because we've been working on this for a while and we have not talked about it much publicly, but the fact is this is something we've been working on here for at least the last 9 months or so.
Kayla, do you want to close us out?
Oh, yeah, sure. You touched on it a little bit in your remarks about not wanting to have a blanket reason, but the gun violence and the homicides, are they more one-off incidents? Are they like gang related? What's driving the violence? Have you found in your analysis?
So of the few that happens, each one is its own case, and they have their own history and background of what has occurred. But for the most part, I would say that, most of the incidents aren't random. I would say that in general, most of the incidents aren't random. And that's about as far as I can say about that, because the families and the victims involved in that, deserve more than a statement put out there that way. That being said, we are doing all we can. I think this year we've resolved over 50% of the homicides that have actually happened this year. And so we're looking to get to. Yes, made an arrest on over half of the ones that we've had this year, with the goal of holding all of them accountable.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Great.
Thank you.
Do you want to go through